welcome back to another episode of Coaches on Zoom Drinking Coffee. I've got my coffee here. Casey, did you come prepared?
I'm gonna go water today. Sorry,
Right.
I've had like 6 cups. So
Yeah, likewise. I'm not sure if there's actually coffee left in there, a little bit, but Casey Jacox, it's great to have you here. We've been introduced about 2 weeks ago, yet this is like the fourth conversation we've had in 2 weeks.
I know.
That's a good sign, I suppose. And thanks for coming on the show, and it's great to have you here.
Oh, I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad our paths have crossed. And as we talked before you started recording, they feel like they're more intertwined. So it's funny how those things happen in life.
It is. So, this is a podcast about coaches, and I think the last time we chatted, I kind of caught you on a line that you were kind of presenting yourself as a new coach, when in actual fact, it sounded to me like you've been coaching for an awful long time, and much like my background, have been around coaches for an awful long time. So maybe we go back in the journey a little bit. You were a football player, and obviously a pretty good football player by the sounds of it, and around some coaches. How did, as a player, what was coaching to you, at that stage of your life?
Yeah, and just in case there's some British fans, it's not football like soccer, but like American football, for the record. I've been very blessed, Andrew, to be around some coaches that impacted me to the greatly this day. From, I'm 44 years young, and I have, when I was 15, 16, coaches that taught me so much about accountability, hard work, making it my goals, not theirs, visualization, follow through, accountability, all of these skill sets in life, resilience, grit, that transferred into my business life. Mm. And I'm glad you called me on that, because you're right there. As a former player, as a quarterback, I'm a coach in the field. I'm coaching the huddle. I'm coaching the team. I'm changing the play line of scrimmage when things don't look right. I'm coaching, influencing folks to be a part of the path of, this path of mastery we're trying to get better at. But those same coaches were just so unique, impactful about finding ways to one ways they maybe treated me versus the way they might have treated someone else. And it wasn't the same. There wasn't like a black and white formula. They were great listeners. They were great. They asked great questions. They reminded me when I'd miss a weightlifting session or a throwing session, like, hey, did your goals change because you didn't show up? Mm. They helped with helping me find clarity. Like, I had a major injury my senior year in high school and didn't play football my senior year, and thought I was done. Thought I was going to done not even playing college. And, my coach ended up allowing me to become essentially an offensive coordinator and help call plays. And when I watched another guy replace me and go on to set all these records and be so super successful, and as a 17-year-old immature kid, my coach, his name is Marty Osborne, he had the patience to help me grow, still same folks in the team, the coach to help them win, but still being able to find clarity to help me in a role where even though I couldn't play because I was injured, he still helped me become part of the team. Mm. And so I know you hit on a lot of different things there. You made me think about, but long-winded answer. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's always interesting if we think back about what inspires us to end up in the kinds of roles that we do. And it usually is, a handful of people who create an experience that kind of stuck with us, right? Yeah. It sounds like you've had a bunch. It's funny. My story is quite similar. I broke a wrist. And as a swimmer, that wasn't very useful place to be. And so my coach would have me come in and help out with the young group and do some teaching and some coaching. And it was a huge part of the reason why, the way my life and sort of career path unfolded, that I chose to go into coaching. So these things happen. You never know exactly why they're happening, but that's cool. So you then went, after sport and ended up, it's funny, you mentioned being the quarterback and leading a huddle. You moved to being the quarterback and leading the huddle of a sales organization, and being very successful in that. And so how was that shift from going from sport? I work with a lot of athletes who I always say to them, you know, at some point you got to take off the jersey and, you know, got to put on a new jersey, because you're not defined by that anymore. You know, you're not defined by that uniform. What was that transition like for you to go from the sports field into business and into sales?
Well, I think it's funny. I was on a different podcast called the Recovering Athlete Podcast. And so we're specifically targeting that. And I think it was easier for me. Well, let me take that back. When I was done, when I knew I was done, it was like this emotional, like watershed moment, because I was like, oh my God, this is the thing I played for 15 years of my life. Now it's gone. Getting into it, the experience I talked about, the injury, that experience, to getting hurt again in college, thankfully didn't impact playing time. But then I think back to a moment where I was leading the league in passing my junior year in college. Yards, touchdowns, everything. And the first play of the game, we come out and throw like a 75-yard touchdown, start the game. Like, here we go again. We're just going to roll these guys up. The next 2 or 3 series, I played atrocious, like horrible. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? What's going on? And my coach, Bo Baldwin, at the time, who now is the head coach at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, just left University of Cal Berkeley. He says, Jacox, take a break. You're going to sit for a little bit. And I was like, what? What do you mean I'm going to sit? And so I mean, right there's that slight edge moment where I could be like, screw you, man, and let ego get in the way, not be but I was self-aware, knowing that something was not right. You know, he put me back in after halftime, after me kind of approaching him and trying to persuade him to saying, hey, I'm your guy, let's go. So as I think about those defining moments as a 19, 20-year-old kid, you know, that helped me in business, because it was just about, you know, making be the best version of Casey today. And in a sales world where I came from, the staffing consulting industry, it was very, it can be up and down, and, you know, the highs, the highs, and lows, the lows. And I always wanted to, you know, remember that phrase of act like you've been in the end zone before, and just get back in the huddle. Hey, so what? You made a huge throw on 3rd and 18. We haven't scored yet. We're still on the 42-yard line. Let's go. Get back in the huddle. And so that mindset I've taken with me, and I think it's a dangerous mindset, because it's great for motivation and keeping growth and getting better. But it's one of those things where my wife reminds me, which I think she's right, is like, sooner or later, it's not about that. You got to just take a deep breath and enjoy where you're at in life and be present, and not have to be this psycho growth mindset person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because it's hard to know where that line really is. Most of the successful people I've been around never felt successful, because their eyes never stopped looking down the road, you know, and seeing the next opportunity. And, you know, maybe there's a balance or a nuance to that we need to figure out. Can't say I figured it out yet. But I
think it's that motivation versus fear of success.
Yeah, it could be, you know. I mean, for me, I just look around the world and go, and there's no shortage of stuff that needs to be done better, and opportunities to contribute. And, you know, as long as, I've been on your podcast talking about fatherhood. So, you know, as long as there's a balance around our role as fathers and as parents, as partners, as members of a sort of a circle of friends and community, you know, those have to be part of the equation.
Right.
But it's hard for me to wake up in the morning and not feel a sense of need and to do something to help with something that's going on around. And, you know, I don't feel the need to apologize for that too often. No. So,
well, no. I'm a big John Wooden fan. And I love his coach, when he talked, one of his favorite quotes, he says, the day I'm done learning is the day I essentially start dying.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, like, for example, like reading's a per example. I love, like, all the books you have in your background. I read a ton. I love just exploring the mind. But I think sometimes it's okay, like, to have like a mindless book about like a fiction book, versus these constant, because I'm guilty of that. So I'm trying to be self-aware of, because I think if your best version of yourself isn't just checking yourself, just like you want to check the people you're coaching, you have to walk the walk sometimes with that.
Yeah. Well, and this is a good time to transition to the conversation around our current day coaching, because, I've been doing it for 30 years and, I've just a month ago invested, quite a bit of money in terms of having my own coach and working with somebody that's at sort of the next level, not just next level from a business perspective, but next level also in terms of, just having a creativity around how they offer their coaching programs, and, how they bring people together that create a community of like-minded people. All things that are really important to me is to figure out what that next stage of coaching could look like for me. And again, I suppose that's that drive to always be seeking, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of feeling like you've arrived. But you're at, from a professional business coaching perspective, you're at pretty early stages of this phase of your coaching career now.
Correct.
So talk to us a little bit, like, what's the positioning of, how you're taking all your life experiences and then sharing that with others?
Yeah, no, a great question. So for me, Andrew, I'm, as I mentioned, I was at a company for 20 years, sales leadership, sales top seller for 10 years in a row. Company put me in a different role, and it got me into part of like strategy work, some marketing work, some writing, speaking, but also part of that job was mentoring our sales leaders and not only mentoring, but coaching them, and also coaching our top performers. Mm-hmm. And I was measured on how do we improve from getting them from these next levels of where they get plateaued. And when it was time for me to gracefully, we parted ways, I started thinking like, listen, I've been an athlete my whole life. I've been a leader my whole life. I've been coaching indirectly, kind of to your point earlier, without really knowing I was coaching. I coach youth sports. I run a youth sports basketball organization. I've had numerous examples where I've helped improve kids' lives or my teammates' lives. Mm-hmm. And it got me thinking, like, why wouldn't I do this? Why wouldn't I go out on my own and do this? It makes no sense. And so I had this epiphany where things that seemed simple to me or common sense, because I was in this my company for 20 years. And then when you kind of get released from jail, as sarcastically saying, you're like, wow, there's a lot of people that I could use my help. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the areas I'm tackling are really kind of through the foundations of my book, which was called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, where I write about, 6 common sense strategies to improve life and business relationships, and talk simplistically around, these are old school stuff. So some of the new digital kids, they might not like my style, but to me, it's about starting each day with the golden rule of life. What does that mean? It means treating people the way you want to be treated. That is the purpose of culture. Setting expectations, follow through, the impact of that. If I'm going to be on time, if I'm, sometimes people feel it's okay to be 15 minutes late and not talk about it. Like, that's not okay. That's how you lose customers. Right. The power of listening and hearing, the power of documentation, the power of checking your ego and being self-aware, being able to be coached, finding ways to constantly be coached, and then realizing just being patient. So I think when you focus on those 6 things, as I think about my career and selling at an elite level for consistently year over year, those are what I really focused on. Mm. So my goal, as I wrote my book for 4 reasons. I wrote it to help shape the mind of a 20 to 30-year-old. I helped to really get them thinking that they're more of an EQ-based mindset. Someone who's 30 and older who just maybe stuck and they need just a simple tweak to kind of get back on track. The third reason would be an executive at a company that says, man, I like the way this guy thinks. I want my sellers thinking this way, and make it part of like an onboarding program. And then lastly would be trying to help colleges and universities train, whether it's MBA students or just people who are about to leave a business program to get into sales and marketing. Yeah. So I think if I can achieve those things and make an impact on someone's life, and realizing you don't need to be an a-hole to be successful. And I think too often with a lot of sales organizations, it's this bro culture where it's macho, bravado. And, to me, it's not about that. It's about, being humble, being vulnerable, owning your gaps, and selling at a high level, doing it with compassion, but also just doing it with humility. And I would love to be able to work with organizations out there that maybe has some arrogance, and to be able to just ask questions in a way that makes them realize, listen, dude, I've done a lot more than you will ever do based on what I'm seeing from you. And I didn't have to be an a-hole to do it. So that'd be fun to be able to coach people in that way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, this idea of bringing the old back is, I actually think, I mean, I'm excited to see how it's actually happening. I was just thinking, I've got a series of books behind me by Ryan Holiday that are based on Stoicism, right? I mean, thousands of year-old philosophies that he was able to rewrite into a way that resonated with people. I've got an indigenous entrepreneur I'm working with right now who's building a leadership training program for universities based on indigenous knowledge and sort of the combination of how, all the elements work together, but, in terms of how to take care of the earth, but also how to take care of community. And it strikes me that, the golden rules of being a good human have always been effective golden rules for how to sell things as well. And to me, it's especially perhaps in the time that we're in right now, it seems like this moment where we do have a chance to kind of redefine some of these things and bring a different message forward. It's fair to say, regardless of the virus situation, it's fair to say that if you look at the economic impact of the virus, the inequality of the impact has never been more present. And that's a byproduct of the system that we allowed to develop around us. And I think there's going to be an appetite for maybe looking at some new ways of approaching, how business operates, what does capitalism look like, what does leadership mean, and, how do we sell, right? How do we bring solutions to people that they actually need, that serve other people, versus trying to meet quotas and, accomplish arbitrary metrics?
Well, I'm glad you said that. So I was talking to a chief strategy officer recently, and we talked about some of the thoughts around some of these old school things that I think need to be new school all the time. And I said, think about if you had, so you're going after a new market, new offering, whatever it may be, and you want to talk about account segmentation, who's selling on my team, what are they going to go, what problems are we looking to solve, how are we going to solve them, how are we going to solve them differently, where's our proof, how are we going to do all these things? That's great. You got to know that stuff. However, what if 5 of your sales reps are just complete arrogant? No one likes them. No one wants to be around them. They're rubbing customers the wrong way. They're rubbing your team the wrong way. They're treating your admins like crap. They're showing up, and you're allowing it because you like the revenue they're producing. All you're doing is eroding your culture.
Right.
And you're afraid to step up to say that's not going to be allowed. Right. And I'd love to figure out how many other companies are like that out there right now. Probably a lot. I'd be willing to bet more often than not. And so if leaders can stand up and say, we're going to have core values like everybody does, but I think sometimes companies have core values just to say they have core values. Do you really live them? And are they visible? And then are you holding people accountable because they're not following through on those core values?
Yeah.
Like, are you letting people go because they violate them? That's where I think that golden rule really is powerful. You can change people and cultures.
Yeah, it's a great point, actually. I just finished another episode this morning with Tony Martinetti, who's a coach I've gotten to know over the last couple of weeks. And his message is around sort of new form of leadership, the people-centric leadership. And he's come at it after being about 25, 30 years, seeing a different kind of leadership than a people-centric leadership. And your message of those 6 principles are not limited to sales. Those are really leadership principles, right? They're about taking care of your people first. And right, if you're the leader, whether it's the CEO or the leader of a team within a company, how would you want to be led, right? And I think it's really interesting, especially as you and I focus on a similar demographic of sort of these emerging leaders and business people, that they get scoffed at by some for sort of their mindset towards work-life balance and the kind of expectations they have for a job. And I applaud them all the time because I'm like, I think we all thought the same things. We just didn't have the guts to actually say it.
Right.
And this community has come out, the millennials and the generation to follow them. They're just unapologetic to say that they've watched their parents live life in a certain way and have decided that's not for them. And I say good for you, but now we actually have to have leaders who embrace that and then know how to still create positive, productive outcomes from a workforce that has a different perspective on work-life balance. And that's the kind of, employee you're going to develop with your 6-step approach, is somebody that's focused on, how do I support these people in my organization?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. And I think when I created this and wrote about it, and how I wrote about it was just creating this massive word map where I started with the one word, and then I say, okay, what words from that connect to other words? So it was vulnerability, humility, hard work, resilience, grit, listening, here, like all the words I could think of. And then I put those words together, and ironically, chapters 7 in my book is not about the 6 principles that I'm teaching salespeople. It's about, how does this framework impact people outside of their normal life? And so I talk about personal relationship with my dad, who has dementia. And it's a lot of these are like ego based, like win the, not the. So I said, win the relationship with my dad, not the dementia. And then I have a coaching one where it says, win the relationship with the athlete, not the outcome of the game. And then the sarcastic one, that if any boaters are out there, it's win the marriage, not the boat launch.
Right.
Meaning that, and I literally, my wife and I took our boat out this weekend, and I was like, I should have read my book right before I read that chapter, because she's like, right, turn left. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what you're telling. And I can just feel the anxiety, the stress, because boat launch is packed. People are like, come on, dude, hurry up. And I'm like, and I suck at backing the boat down.
Right.
I wish I was better at it. So I'm getting better, but like it's all about ego. It's just being self-aware. And even if you have a bad day of ego and self-awareness, I hope people when get out of my book is you can go back. It's never too late to apologize. And it's never too late to say, man, for example, I went to my son right before he came on, and I handled something yesterday where I was saying no for something he wanted to do, really for no reason, other than I just said no. And then I stopped and said, it was not the right way to handle it. And I went back and explained to him that, hey, life as a dad is sometimes tough, trying to do the right thing, trying to make the right decisions. But we end up kind of saying yes, based on mom and I talked about through it. And in the end, it wasn't that big a deal. And I was self-aware, and I want to make sure you're learning these lessons on the way, buddy, is dad's going to make mistakes too, right? Yeah. I've yet to meet someone who's perfect. And so I think if you can get people, no matter what, if it's business, life, whatever it is, to get to think that way, just creates a lot more positive environment.
Yeah. That's a great point. As parents, boy, there's no do-overs, but you can always apologize. So been there. I
thought I was going to be done throwing interceptions, but I keep throwing them and dad.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, I was curious about that. You are now, you've got a book, got a coaching practice, you're teaching other people. There's probably some reflections on like what life back in the huddle with the perspectives you have now. What would be different?
What would I do differently?
Yeah.
I was a very cerebral player, meaning that if it was trips open right, 334 Z post X stop, which I still remember, I can go through the reads progression right now. I was so almost robotic because I was trained so hard. You go through reads, take what they give you. But I wish what I'd done differently is if I have a receiver running a certain route against a certain defense, I know he's going to beat him, even though he's not my first option. I wish I would have done that more, taken a little bit more risks, and say, hey, my buddy Ty Nunez, this is coming to you, brother. Ryan Seal, this is coming to you. It's like focus on that versus, so I mean, it's safe's always going to be good, but sometimes it's good to take risks if you know that if you think, okay, I'm betting on my guy who's a better athlete, better player, because I think that could help give him confidence. It might ruffle feathers with my coach. I'm like, what are you doing? But if we score, he's not going to be super frustrated.
Right.
So, other than that, I mean, my journey, Andrew, was so like, I feel like I've never arrived. I still have never arrived. Even with all the success I had in business, I don't ever feel like I've arrived because I'm new. It's like, I was a new author. I'm not Stephen King. I'm not, Ryan Holiday, even though I quote and reference Ryan Holiday in my book and referenced him. And I love his ego, the enemy, obstacles the way. Yeah. And I never podcast. I'm new at podcasting. Who cares what I've done in football? My company didn't care.
Right.
The people I'm interviewing podcasts, they don't care that I was good at this. Doesn't impact them. So this journey of life, and maybe eventually when I join the rest home, the assisted living facility, I might need to be the best walker or guy with the cane.
Something tells me you will. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's cool. But it's interesting because I think, those perspectives of, throwing to the guy who's maybe your second read, we make those choices every day in our life today, right?
Yeah.
I put a post out today about this on LinkedIn. A lot of people who are hurting right now, everybody's dealing with the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty around us. That's pretty much a given for every human being right now, is we don't really know exactly what's going to be happening. Perhaps we never really have known, but we fooled ourselves into the routine of life, seeming like we had some control. But, we have a lot of control over what we choose to do. And so, you throw that easy pass, you're going to get a certain result. But there are lots of opportunities out there right now. And, people that are losing their jobs, people that are, working from home and going, they kind of like the balance that it provides them for their life. There are choices, right? And so, that riskier pass for a lot of people is about maybe exploring something they've long thought about, but never really, taken action on. And I do think that that's part of the reflection right now, is the easy passes get you to a certain level in life, but cerebrally, there was the potential for more there.
Sure.
And you never lose that, right? As you go through your life that there's more upside, and every once in a while you got to throw that long pass just to see what your potential is and see what's possible.
Yeah. Well, I found myself later when I was a senior. I did it a couple times. Thankfully, it worked out well. But as I think about right now, like there's two schools. I'm an eternal optimist. If there's pessimism and optimism's that way, I'm like 58 miles that way, borderline naive.
Yeah.
And I was reading this book recently. It said, optimists live 2 years longer. I was like, sweet, I'm gonna keep that. And, but like some people might say, oh God, are you nervous starting a business during COVID-19? God, that must be scary. I'm like, no, what a better time. I couldn't, people need positivity right now. People need, how do you sell out of a crisis? How did you grow year over year dealing with .com boost, the 2008 crisis, losing accounts, getting kicked out of accounts? It wasn't your fault. How did you deal with it? How did you stay positive? What about speaking? There's not going to be any events. So all the people who are speaking, they're going to be virtual events. I got to learn how to do it. It's okay. Thank you to Zoom for giving us a chance to talk today. Right. I mean, I just think the mind is one of the most untapped. I always joke with my kids, call it a muscle, even though it's not a muscle. It's the untapped muscle, because there's so much different teeny muscles you can strengthen to get better and become better at doing certain things. And a lot of it is, if you simplify that, like John Gordon wrote a post today on LinkedIn. He had this infographic around the things you have control over, like attitude, effort, mindset, work ethic, simple things that we just make way too hard on ourselves as human beings.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's probably why we've connected, and we'll be doing some work together in the future some way, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So,
how about you as a swimmer, as a swim coach, what would you do differently?
Thanks for putting me on spot. No, it's great though. I think one of the big things in my coaching days was just, people used to come and watch me coach, and they were confused because I felt like I was more orchestra conductor than coach. And I'd have 20 people in the water in front of me doing 20 different things. But I felt like I maybe held myself back as a coach in terms of reaching the highest levels possible, by not putting myself into as uncomfortable a situation as I could in terms of like working with higher level athletes earlier. Like I went on lots of trips and had a chance to interact with some higher level athletes, but I wish I had done that earlier in my life and tested myself. And it's a big part of now, in my business coaching, why I'm seeking out communities of coaches to work with, because I think I felt like there was more in me than I really tapped into. I'm not sure from a coaching approach perspective, I would have done things a whole lot differently, but I do know that I reflect back that there's probably more I could have been as a sports coach. So maybe I'm making up for that now and doubling down on that in this new coaching world.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I really appreciate your time today. Really appreciate the book, and we'll put the links to all that in the notes with the show. And, I'd say to everybody watching out there, anybody that's trying to influence, teams or leaders or young people who believes in these sort of 6 core simple principles that have been around for a long time that just need to be reinforced and have a really positive messenger, to reach out to Casey. And I think he'd be a great person to help you deliver that message. So look forward to working together in any way we do in the future. And thanks for coming on.
No, you bet. I would end with, like Stephen Covey says at the end of his book, he didn't create the 7 habits. He just focused on them. He wasn't perfect at it. And, for me, I think what I'm excited about is I didn't create these, far from it, but I can give real life stories of real business and life experience success, but more failure, that I'm willing to share, because I think that's where the true learning is, when people hear about other people's gaps or where they've stumbled versus this imperfect life about they always are scoring touchdowns, which is not the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also highlight your podcast on fatherhood, and maybe if you want to do a little pitch for that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's called the Quarterback Dadcast, and it's my play on words of, it's a former collegiate quarterback, and not to be Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite and live those glory days, but it's, not to be stereotypical, but we want a father to have leadership of a house, not just because a mom can do it, because my wife's probably a better leader than I am, but as dads, you can still find ways to become better leaders. And you do that through owning your gaps, owning your mess, figuring out ways you can get better. And so we do is we really interview dads. We hear about their stories along the way, the ups, the downs. It could be from losing a job, losing a child to cancer. I mean, tough, sometimes lighthearted. And it's 45 to an hour long shows. And we just provide stories to realize, as fathers, no matter what kind of job you do or don't do, what we have in common is we're fathers. And I'm just trying to help create a community that gives dads inspiration to find out ways to become the best leader they can, because it helps save marriages, hopefully, and help shape the lives of future kids who are going to be our business leaders one day.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I really enjoyed our conversation on your show. So thanks again for coming on, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Take care.